Good morning everybody and welcome back to another video. Why is my nose so red? I haven't taken any hay fever medication this morning. That's probably why. We'll ignore that. My forehead's red as heck. Rusty! Rusty! Why am I calling him? He can't hear me. Anyway, hi everybody and welcome back to another video. It's good to have you back, or if you're new, welcome. I am today going to talk about the books that I read in 2024 because one of the goals I set for myself every year is to read one book every month, and last year I actually got to read 15, so I bet my goal. I'm actually really happy about that because I'm a slow reader and I go through slumps quite badly where sometimes I won't read for like 1 or 2 months and then I have to play a lot of catch up. So I'm proud of myself, and I kind of wanted to do just like a quick review of all of the books that I read. It's not going to be super in depth. It's probably just going to be what I rated them out of 5, whether I liked them or didn't like them, and maybe why, just quickly. I have them here on my phone as per usual, so I'm going to be looking down or looking around a lot. Chicken just hooned past the doorway. I don't know if you heard her. And yeah, and I'm really excited to get into my reading list for 2025. Hopefully we hit that 12 book mark again. If we don't, we're going to. There's no if we don't. I was trying to think of an excuse, but there's no excuses. There's plenty of time. Figure it out. I will do my best to put like a picture of like the cover of the book on the screen. I'm still kind of learning a lot of things when it comes to editing these videos, so hopefully I can figure that out by the time that this is posted, and they're somewhere here or somewhere here. But anyway, let's just get into it. So the first book that I read last year was 12 Years a Slave by Solomon Northup. Also, apologise in advance if I butcher any of these authors' names. I'm probably going to, but I'm just going to do my best. So, 12 Years a Slave. This wasn't a book that I would say that like you can sit down and say, oh, I enjoyed reading that book just because of the contents, obviously. But I did think it was very good. I rated it a 3 out of 5, and that's only because I struggled personally with some of the language, like the way the book was written, and that's 100% a reflection on me, not a reflection on the book. I did still, like, I was very drawn into it. I read it very quickly. It's not a subject that I have any prior knowledge of. For those of you who haven't had any exposure to the story of 12 Years a Slave, it is about slavery in America. I haven't seen the movie, and I don't think I can watch it because the book itself was so sad. I genuinely don't know if I can do it again. I don't think I'd read the book again because it did a lot of things for me and it gave me a lot to think about, and it was just very sad and quite an emotionally tolling read, but very good, and I honestly would recommend it to someone else, especially if you have seen the movie and liked it. I'm one of those people who's a bit of like 90% of the time the book is better, so I would definitely recommend reading it. I enjoyed it. I thought it was a very good read, and I think it's definitely something that can educate you on the topic if you're someone like me who just is very kind of, I think, ignorant to that portion of history. The next book I read is Orange is the New Black by Piper Kerman. Now, the book that I read, the cover of the book had the like cast of the TV show on it. I personally absolutely loved the TV show, so I was really stoked to find this book at a book sale. Pretty much all of these books that I found are secondhand as well. I used to buy them at book sales a lot in New Zealand, so I think I got this book for like $1. I was so excited to read it because I thought it was going to be the book version of the TV show. It is very much not. I ended up rating this book 2.5 out of 5, and I kind of think that was a little bit generous. Like, I honestly think I could have given it a 2. It is in my top 3, like, I don't want to say worst books, but like top 3 books that I did not like that I read in 2024. It's definitely number 3. I thought it was going to be a book version of the TV show. It was not. It was still like a fairly good read, like in terms of if I had never seen the TV show and just read the book by itself as a standalone, it was a pretty good book, and I think that's why I gave it a 2.5, like that extra half a point. I did enjoy it. It was an easy read. I read it quite quickly, but because my brain was comparing it to the TV show the whole time, I was ultimately a bit disappointed with this book. Number 3 was The Fault in Our Stars by John Green. Now, I've read this book so many times, and my thoughts when picking this book to read last year was because I had kind of gone through a slump. At the end of 2023, I had some books that I didn't really love. The start of 2024, I wasn't starting out super strong with books I was really involved in, so I was like, look, we'll get ourselves out of the slump before we really get into it, and we will pick something that we know we love. I haven't read the book in quite a few years. It is a book that I relate to relatively deeply for multitude of reasons, and I just love it. I speed read this book in just a couple of days, which is great for me, and it definitely took me out of that slump and got me really excited about reading again. If you haven't read it, 100% recommend it. If you have read it again because it's that good. Don't get me wrong, it absolutely destroys me emotionally every single time, but it's just something that there's just a quality to this book, and I think it's because I relate to it so deeply. Like, every time I read this book, it makes me feel a little bit seen, and like, even though it's a book character, like, you feel like someone understands you a little bit, and I think that's why I love this book so much. So I will read this book a million more times in my lifetime, 100%. I rated this a 5 out of 5. Oh, the next book was The Complete Jack the Ripper by Donald Rumbelow. I had to actually read and make sure that's the complete title. I'm pretty sure it is. It's like a composition of, like, obviously the tale of Jack the Ripper and what he did, and then like an overview of who the suspects were and why. Now, I'm really into true crime, and I thought finding this book was gonna be like a big thing. This ended up being my like number 2 in my top 3 books that I did not like, that I hated last year. I rated it a 1 out of 5. I don't ever rate a book a 0 out of 5, so 1 is the lowest that I will go. Rated it a 1 out of 5. The first section where it explained like what he did and like the details, I guess, was something that I found quite interesting. The second half of the book, where it talked about like the suspects and the stories and everything, it just really lost it for me. I almost did not finish this book. It took me so long to read. Like, I think I was stuck on this book for at least 6-7 weeks. I just had no interest in reading it. I had no interest in finishing it. I did tough it out and finish it. I would not recommend it, and I would not read it again. It is a 1 out of 5 for me. It was just so boring. Sorry. Ooh, number 5, and this is definitely my top 3 books of last year. It's In Order to Live by, is it Yeonmi Park? I totally butchered that. I'm so sorry. This book is about a girl who grew up in North Korea, and it's about like her escape from the country, her life growing up, her life post-escape. Honestly, it's genuinely one of the best books I have ever read. Ever. Hands down, my top 10 best books I've ever read. I flew through this book. I was addicted to it. I could not believe that this was a real story, because just so much went on and there were so many twists and turns, and it's so hard to believe that so much can be packed into such a short space in someone's life. Like, I just think she is astounding. Like, I think she is an amazing person. I love this book. I will 100% recommend it to anybody who would ever think about it, like, or consider it. If you need something to read, read this book. It definitely made me appreciate my life more and my struggles, and be a lot more thankful for what I have and what I have been through. I cried so much reading this book, but like, I think finishing it, you also kind of can't help but feel like a real sense of like pride for her, and just, like, I could talk about this book for forever. 5 out of 5, top 10 books of all time. Please read this book. Book number 6 is called, again, this is one with quite a long title, so I'm going to read it. Titanic Survivor, The Memoirs of Violet Jessop, Stewardess. And I believe it was put together by, I'm going to try and figure out, John Maxon Graham. So, yeah. Yes, okay, that's it. That's what it's called. I liked this book. I did rate this a 2.5 out of 5, and I will explain why. I think I'm trying to put this delicately because I don't want to sound like an asshole, but I think it definitely, not milked, but like utilized her time on the Titanic to sell and to market the book. And I understand that people do that on purpose because that is what people want to read. It's what people want to buy. So they do that, they use it. It's another case of, if this was a standalone book and it wasn't titled Titanic Survivor, you know, I went into this thinking that this book was going to be primarily about the Titanic, her time on the Titanic, the experience, what she went through, the sinking post-Titanic. And it very much was not. I think in the book there's about 2 chapters that are on the Titanic. The actual, like, written portion of her experience on the Titanic goes by very quickly. I'm one of those people who has like a bit of a weird and unhealthy fascination with the Titanic, so I was really excited to read about it, and it to me kind of just felt like it was glossed over. Now, if it was just called The Memoirs of Violet Jessop, a Stewardess, it probably would have gotten a 4 out of 5 for me. Her life is so interesting, and she was on so many more ships than just the Titanic. She was actually on all 3 of the ships, so she was on the Titanic, the Olympic, and the Britannic, and like that to me would have marketed the book enough. Like, she went through the sinking of the Titanic, I believe the sinking of the Britannic, and then the accident that the Olympic had, the other 2. They might be switched, don't listen to me because I don't 100% know what order they went in, but she was involved in all 3. Like, I think she's a great, super interesting person who has just the worst luck in the world, but a gorgeous outlook on her life. Like, if it was marketed as a book about a stewardess and her life, and kind of not marketed as a Titanic-based book, it would have gotten a much higher rating for me because I did enjoy it, but it's hard to enjoy it when you bought the book for a specific reason that it didn't really follow through on for me. Ooh, number 7 was The Colour Purple by Alice Walker. Now, I have heard so much about this book. I believe it's the winner of a Pulitzer Prize. I've seen it everywhere, like people talking about how much they love it, but I had no idea what it was going to be about. Again, it's another book that I found at a book sale randomly for like $1. And I read it on our flight to Rarotonga in May. And literally that is how long it took. I read it in the airport and then on the plane, and then I think I read it for like an hour or 2 in the hotel because I definitely sped read this book. This is one of the books that I read the fastest this year because I couldn't put it down. I did end up rating it a 4 out of 5. I really liked it. This is a book that I would recommend to people. It's kind of written in the style of 2 sisters writing letters back and forth to one another. And the story didn't go how I thought it was going to go at all. I thought it was so interesting. And again, it's kind of based in like historic America. I don't know if I'm like, again, I'm not very well educated on these kind of things, but it is based obviously in the past. And I just thought it was so interesting, like, to read about that time period and the people who lived in those time periods and their experiences, but not told as like a story. It was literally just told from the point of view of someone writing a letter, and I didn't expect the book to be like that, and I loved that. Like, that was my favorite thing about this book, is just the style in which it was written and the choice that the author made to make it like that. Loved it. I thought it was fantastic. If you haven't read this book, you definitely should. Is there a movie on this book? Because I would actually consider watching that. Oh, another name for me to butcher. My bad. But this next one is A Thousand Splendid Suns by Khaled Hosseini. close enough. I'm very sorry if it's not. I love him. I love his books. I love The Kite Runner. This was the second book of his that I read, and I gave this a 4 out of 5. I so enjoyed this book. I thought it was fantastic. I just have so many feelings about his books. Because when I first read Kite Runner in school, obviously I was like quite young, I thought it was like an autobiography, like a memoir. And when I realised that it wasn't, like, that shook me that someone could even like write so in depth and so beautifully and with so much feeling something that was made up. So when I read this one, this, like, I was about to say 11 out of 10. Like, I don't remember why I rated it a 4.5. I think maybe it just didn't quite hit that perfect level for me, but I did really enjoy it. I think the story was beautiful. I love how it changes perspectives. It made me cry so much. But to me, like, if a book is gonna make me cry, it automatically gets a really, really high rating from me. I love, again, like I said, the changing in perspectives. It would leave you hanging at really certain points where you're reading about someone's story and you just want to know what happened so badly. But that's how he keeps you reading in this book, is because you're like, oh, okay, well, I'll just read from this person's point of view so that I can get back to the other person just as quickly. But then you can't stop thinking about the other characters and what's going to happen and what's happening to them. And they are so fleshed out and the characters are so developed that, like, you end up caring for them. You end up so invested in the stories and what is going on. I love him. I love this book. 4 out of 5. Definitely recommend. Please read this if you're looking for something. So what I do is I post like book reviews on my Instagram as well. So that's kind of what I've been referencing. Like, I have my list of books that I've read, and then I also have like my Instagram like review that I posted, because it has like a few details of what I thought about the book. And I've just realized that I missed one. That's so annoying. But I read number 9 for 2024 was Bones Buried Deep by Kathy, is it Rice? Raish? I don't know. I've heard people say it a million different ways and I don't know how to say her name. I rated this a 3 out of 5. Now, if you know me in person, you'll know I absolutely love the Bones TV series. Now, it is like my comfort series. My sister introduced it to me when I was a teenager and I'm just absolutely in love with it. I've watched it a million times. I watch it at least once a year and I always will because I adore it. And these, I don't know if the TV show was based off the books or the books off the TV show. Not sure. But the book specifically that I read had Temperance Brennan and Seeley Booth on the cover. So, that's that. Now, I rated it a 3 out of 5 because, again, this is hard for me because I don't know what came first, the books or the TV show. But because I saw the TV show first, I obviously have in my head like profiles on these characters and how they act and things like that. And reading this book, I thought that the character of Seeley Booth didn't align with TV show Seeley quite as much as I would have liked it to. Like, especially in the start of the book, they made him quite, like, dumb, and he's not dumb at all. Like, he's exceedingly street smart. He's very good at what he does. And I think, yeah, that was just a little bit disappointing. And I think, again, in the TV show, a little bit with Brennan as well, she's always been, like, a bit badass, a bit, like, edgy, and it just kind of didn't translate for me in the book. I'm definitely going to read more of her books because I just want more exposure to her writing. Perhaps this wasn't the best book to start with, or, you know, maybe I need to go back and read. I want to read her series because she's got a huge series, and I think this book was just like one standalone one. So I want to go and read the series because I'm hoping, I've heard only great things about them, and I'm hoping they live up to what I really, really want the book series to be, because I hold the TV show in such high regard. Would I recommend people read it? I'm 50-50. I need to read more of her books to see if maybe I would recommend the actual series to you. This book I'm a bit on. I wouldn't read it again, but I did enjoy it. Number 10. This book is my number 1 book that I hated of last year. And I don't really like saying that, like I need to find a better way. Like I have my top 3 best and top 3 worst, I guess. This is number 1 on the worst list. It is rated a 1 out of 5 by me, and it's The Call of Cthulhu and Other Frightening Tales by H.P. Lovecraft. Now, I bought this book for like $8 because I saw it on the shelf and I was like, oh, hold on, this could be fun. But I really struggled with this book. This is another one that I almost did not finish. It took me quite a long time to read it, considering the book is like this thick, like it's a book of short tales. I did find one of them quite good, but the ones at the start and the finish were so long and I just felt like they dragged. I really struggled with the way the books were written and the language that was used. I think it's obviously written that way for a reason, but for me it felt like a lot of filler language. Like there was a lot of, in my opinion, taking 5 or 6 lines or 5 or 6 sentences to explain something you could have said in about 4 words. And that's what really killed it for me. Like I like to get to the point of things. Like I don't like frills, I don't like fuss. Fuss? The fuck? That's what I struggled with mostly. I think if these books were rewritten or like written in a slightly different style, I probably would have enjoyed it a lot more because the content wasn't bad. And like what the stories were written about was actually quite interesting. There was one that if it was like a book by itself probably would have been a 2 or a 3 out of 5 for me. But as a whole, I hated every second of reading this book, and I try so hard to finish everything that I read, but every time I was like, you know, like that's how this book made me feel. 1 out of 5. I do not recommend it. I am very sorry for anyone who likes this book, but I did not. Number 11, we are getting into our final 5 now. I know this has been a little bit of a long video and it's probably going to be a lot of me rambling, but we're getting there. Number 11 was Serial Killers by Charlotte Gregg, I think. And I rated this a 3 out of 5. It could have been a 4 out of 5, but the first half of the book was so good. I loved it. Like, and it makes me sad because the first half started so strong and the second half kind of just like fizzled out. They still had that wide range of people, but it's almost like they couldn't be bothered doing the research anymore. I felt like a lot of them were glossed over or kind of just touched on very few points. You didn't get that in-depth research that was done with the first half of the book, and I don't know if it's because there was a few more people that are like lesser known. I don't know if it's like maybe it is harder to find information on those cases, but I do just wish that the first half of the book and the quality and the effort that was put into that book had stretched all the way through to the end. So that's why that one is a 3 out of 5 for me. I would say read it. If it's something that you are interested in, I would recommend that you read it because it was still very interesting. Oh. This next one is one of my top 3 books for this year easily, and people are going to be like, what? You haven't seen that? You haven't read that? But might be, I guess. It's My Sister's Keeper by Jodi Picoult. Is that how you say her name? I don't know. But she writes like a genius. I've never seen the movie. I've never read the book. Someone gifted this to me, or I brought it at one of those sales. I can't remember how I got my hands on it, but I had it. And honestly, I knew the ending wasn't going to be as simple as it was being made out to be, but did it tear my heart out anyway? Absolutely. I finished this book in my car before work one morning and bawled my eyes out, and then had to go into work looking like an absolute idiot. But people at my work knew what I was reading, and so literally they all just saw me that day and they were like, you finished it, didn't you? This was a 5 out of 5. Again, I'm not going too in depth as to what all the books are about because I don't want to spoil it for anyone. If people want to read these books and they haven't read them, I don't want to go like too in depth and talk about the storylines and spoil them, but I will just say this is another one of those books that I do relate to in a sense. Obviously, it's not really written from the perspective of the sister. It's all very much, I think Kate is her name. It's all very much the healthy sister's perspective, but because of the situation that she's put in, it's still something that like I feel like I can relate to in a way. This book absolutely destroyed me, but in the best way. Like 5 out of 5. If you haven't read it, please read it. I think I am going to sit down and watch the movie even though I know it's going to destroy me, but it was so good that like I'm willing to go through that again. It's a great book. It's great. I'm so glad I finally read it. Ooh, our last 3, and I think this might be one of my top 3 or my top 5 books for this year. This is I'm Glad My Mum Died by Jennette McCurdy. Now, I grew up probably like right at the end of my adolescence would have been when like iCarly was out. I loved it. I thought it was so funny. I loved Miranda when she was back in Drake and Josh, and I loved the characters. Blah 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 blah. I'm sure everyone has seen or heard of iCarly in some sense. So reading this book kind of like stabbed me in the heart a little bit because it's something I grew up watching and I enjoyed it so much, and it's such like a nostalgic bit of my life for me that once I sat down and read this book and learnt what was actually going on in the background and what Jennette had to go through, like it makes me feel terrible for enjoying the show so much, and I know that wasn't her intention, but it definitely brings to life the things that do happen in the background to these people. Like, just because you're a TV star or a film star, your life is not perfect, and it's actually very, very hard a lot of the time, and we truly have no idea what these people go through in their life. All we see is a character on the screen. I definitely think people who were not just a fan of iCarly but a fan of like the Nickelodeon and the Disney shows and things like that growing up, I think you should read this book. I 100% recommend it. I rated it a 4 out of 5. I don't know why I didn't rate it a 5 out of 5. I guess it just didn't feel right. It's another one of those books that feels a bit weird to say that I enjoyed it because of the content. But I did. I loved reading it. I thought it was fantastic, to be honest. I love how raw and open she was about everything. And I would definitely read it again. I think I can definitely see myself reading it again. It definitely changed my perspective on a lot of things that you can never go back from. This is one of those books that once you read it and once you realise it, changes your view forever. And that's why I think more people should read this book. 100%. 4 out of 5. I really liked it. I think you'd really like it. Go and read it if you want to. Alright, number 14, second to last, we are getting there. It is And the Mountains Echoed, again by Khaled Hosseini. I really need to learn to say his name correctly. I liked this book. I rated it a 3.5 out of 5. Now, I did talk about this because I finished reading this book in my 24-hour reading challenge. I was reading it for a while and I did get kind of stumped in the middle of it. I thought the beginning and the end were very, very good. The middle was just a tiny bit slow for me, and it's the first time I've encountered that with any of his books. I still loved it. It still destroyed me emotionally. I still cried reading it. I still thought it was very, very good. It's just the first time that anything of his has made me sort of like deflate in the middle of it. There was just a little lull there for like a couple of chapters that I was like, and I think it's because it was the section of the book that was written in more like modern day, like it's the section that was in Paris and things like that, and it was, yeah, it didn't hit quite the same for me as the rest of his writing does. Like, his writing is really enthralling to me because he writes about a culture that I have no knowledge about, and I love seeing and being exposed to even a little bit of it. And I suppose when he wrote the portion of this book that was based in Paris, it was sort of a little bit more mainstream to me and didn't have that catch and that hold. I will say that that portion was very important to the book. It had a lot of character development in it and made you understand a lot, so it was necessary. It just wasn't a part that I loved. I would still probably read this book again. I do like his other two books much, much better. But I still really enjoyed it, and I still love everything that he writes. I do believe there is another book that I need to find of his so that I can read it, and I'm 100% going to, because I love him. I think he's a fantastic author. I would recommend him to anyone. I don't know what order the books come in. I don't know if I've accidentally read them out of order. I don't know if it matters, but I will say if you wanted me to recommend any of his books to you, it would probably be The Kite Runner, and then A Thousand Splendid Suns, and then And the Mountain Echoed, in that order. I still really liked it though. Still loved it, still really glad I read it. Would read it again. You should read it too. And my last one for the year, which again I read as part of my 24-hour reading challenge, was Beyond the Wand by Tom Felton. Now this is easily my top 3 books of this year, probably number 1. I love Harry Potter. I love him. I had the biggest crush on him growing up. I think every girl with a sane mind probably did at some point, and that's okay. It's another one similar to Jeanette's book where you realise what was going on behind the scenes, and it definitely made me realise why he loves and he cherishes Harry Potter so much. Like, he is one of the actors, obviously, that has never truly strayed from that identity. It's still very prevalent for him. He still talks about it all the time. He's very, very proud of his involvement in Harry Potter, and after reading his book, I see why, because it was such a huge point in his life. It had like so many good influences for him were involved in that cast and that crew. He has had quite a tough life afterwards. Again, I really appreciated how honest and vulnerable he was in his book, and I kept this book. Now, I don't have a lot of room here for books, so I do tend to cycle in and out. I will read a bunch and then exchange them and get a bunch more, but this is one that will be staying in my collection forever. I rated this 5 out of 5. I absolutely loved it. I cried many times. I laughed many times because he's honestly so funny. Yeah, it again, it changes your perspective on things and it makes you realize a lot of things, and I think you have to be really open when reading these books written by celebrities. Like, you have to have a really open mind and an open heart when you're reading these. You can't just dive on into them prepared only to see the character that they've portrayed that you love. You have to be able to like see them as a person and understand. This is getting rambly, I'm not going to go too deep into it, but I absolutely adored this book. I will read it again. It will stay on my bookshelf for forever. Easily my number 1 book of 2024. That's it. Those are my 15 books. I'm really proud for having met my goal, and I'm hoping to do it again this year. I will do another recap maybe at the end of this year if it's something you guys are interested in. I can also do updates throughout the year if you want to hear about what I'm reading. I do want to reattempt the 24-hour reading challenge, and I want to achieve it this time. I don't want to fail again, so I'm going to get on to that. I do have quite a few books on my shelf right now that I need to read. Really need to read. So we're going to get into that. Thank you all once again for joining me for another video. If you have any recommendations for books that I should read based off what I've just talked about, please let me know. I'm open to reading any genre. I like to keep it quite broad. I do prefer fantasy, but I'll read anything. I'll give anything a go. So if you have recommendations, pop them in a comment below. Make sure you like, make sure you subscribe if you want to see more of my content, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.